this session. Thank you, Silicon Valley Bicycle Coalition, for putting this session together. As you know, micromobility is one of the biggest changes in transportation that we've seen among many in the world in the last few years. It's we at the California Bicycle Coalition think that micromobility has the potential to get bikes and scooters into the hands and as a resource for people like we have not seen in my 25 years of advocacy. And it has the opportunity to do that in an equitable way. It hasn't been implemented in the manner that prioritizes low-income people and people of color and disadvantaged communities, but it could be. The current crisis of the pandemic has at first it seemed to threaten micromobility, but in the last month or two, it's become clear that it is as important a resource as ever, and a very important aspect of resiliency and redundancy in our transportation system. Really grateful that we are able to have this session here today. I will tell you participants a little bit about how this session is going to go. We have three amazing panelists here. We are going to have some conversation and some presentation. Please participate in the conversation by asking questions in the chat. We panelists will see those questions and address them to the best of our ability. The three panelists are fantastic. We have with us Andrea
Arjona.
I'm not usually nervous. Andrea Arjona. Andrea Arjona is with the city of San Jose. She got her first degree from the University de los Andes in the bike-friendly city of Bogota. She got that degree in anthropology, followed it up with a master's in anthropology at San Jose State. Decided she wanted to get into transportation and environment, and so got a second master's degree in city planning. After a period as an environmental impact planner for the city of San Jose, she has become its micromobility specialist, the manager of micromobility in the city of San Jose. You could say she's the Swiss Army knife of micromobility in the city of San Jose. Welcome, Andrea. We also have Sam, and why am I spacing on his last name? Sam Sadel. Sam Sadel is the Senior Director of Government Relations for North America at Lime. Sam spent about 15 years in Washington, D.C. in politics before coming to Lime. I know of Sam through his work to get the Bike Match program started as a volunteer. He and several others have managed to create a system where folks who have bikes who don't need them can get them in the hands of people who need them, especially essential workers. And I'm grateful to Sam personally for that program. And finally, we have Neil Patel. Neil Patel is with Lyft. He's the community affairs manager for Bay Wheels. He's been there for about a year. I met Neil when he was the planning director at the San Francisco Bicycle Coalition. He was there for about 5 years before serving for a time as the external affairs manager at the San Francisco Municipal Transportation Agency and as the associate executive director of the Yerba Buena Community Benefits District. Welcome, Neil. Now let's hear a little bit from each of them about how micromobility is serving their cities and what kinds of challenges and opportunities they see here with the COVID pandemic. Andrea, can we start with you, please?
Sure. Hello, everyone. It is a pleasure to join this panel this morning to talk about the challenges that micromobility users, companies, and cities like ours are facing during this difficult time of COVID. But also, I'm excited to be here to explore with this group some of the opportunities that are surfacing in cities as more residents demand street space to get around by bike or micromodes while social distancing. As they mentioned, I lead the shared micromobility program of the city of San Jose, which broadly speaking focuses on developing plans and policies that can ensure micromobility services in the city, such as e-scooters, are safe and available to a broad spectrum of potential users. Just a small correction before, I used to work in international development outside of the city of San Jose. I actually started in the city of San Jose last year. One of the aspects that we are focusing on a lot at this time of COVID, and that I would like to discuss in more detail later, is planning and advocating for more infrastructure that can safely accommodate multiple micromodes on the street, not just to make space for bikes and scooters, but also to keep clear essential space for pedestrians on sidewalks. With that brief intro, let's hear now from Sam Sadel from Lime.
Great. Thank you, Andrea. And as you all should know, Andrea is more than just the micromobility manager for San Jose. She's the micromobility czar for the entire area. She without a doubt knows more about micromobility in San Jose than anybody else. So please, she knows everything. She's wonderful to work, absolute joy to work with. So many thanks to the Silicon Valley Bicycle Coalition, and of course to Dave for hosting us today. I'm a longtime bike commuter, and I've been with Lime for about the past 3 years. And so I joined 3 years ago. This was a small little bike share startup, and needless to say, things have changed as we're now in 130 plus cities around the world. And so San Jose's evolution in micromobility has also tracked Lime as the city has moved in more into the space, and we have grown. We've done so together. It's been really fascinating to see. My job here is to give somewhat of a broader context, what we're seeing across the country and in fact globally in the COVID and hopefully soon post-COVID era. So to give you some sense of where they're moving, we are seeing a lot of folks starting to rethink how they get around. This is a shock to the system that has caused a lot of people to really re-examine what it takes to get around their communities. And from our perspective, we're seeing people riding our bikes and scooters longer than before. We're seeing about a 34% increase versus this time last year in duration. We're also seeing them ride about 18% further. So from about 1.7 kilometers or 1 mile to 2.2 kilometers or a mile and a quarter, mile and a half. We're also seeing people use bikes and scooters more for recreation and to run errands. So if we compare what we saw before, it was more commutes, and I'll get into the actual breakdown of this later. But we're seeing about a 7% increase in people using this for either recreation, to get outside, or to run errands in the evening. We're also seeing less rush hour use, so far less use in the morning rush hour, and much more use in the afternoon and evening. So we've seen almost a 53% increase in afternoon travel after people get off work and are out of their home offices and are going out to go pick up groceries, so on and so forth. I'll break that down a little bit more for San Jose specifically later, but for now, I'll pass it off to Neil to talk about what they're seeing at Lyft.
Hey folks, my name is Neil Patel. I'm Community Affairs Manager with Lyft for Bay Wheels. Happy to be here today. As Dave mentioned, kind of give you my little bio. I've been in the Bay Area. I've been working on biking for a long time. Happy to have cut my teeth at the SF Bike Coalition, and really grateful for the work that the Silicon Valley Bike Coalition is doing. I'll say that the team here, Shiloh, Emma, Asana, Sandhya, I work with them closest, and they do a great job of supporting our work, helping to promote bike share amongst the community here, with the community and with elected officials. And they also push us to do more, push us to do more and better outreach, and kind of expand our equity work. So, you have some good advocates here, and I encourage you to join as a member if you are not already. I've been at Lyft for about a year, and it's been an interesting journey for me, kind of going from the nonprofit advocacy to the city and now to the private sector. So kind of taking a look at some of these issues from lots of different angles, and yeah, it's an interesting time. You know, I've seen a lot of questions flying right now around what micromobility is and what it's used for. I think those are really great questions. And, you know, maybe 5 months ago, I would have said like, oh, here's a real strict definition of what bike share is and scooter share, and here's how people use it. But I think what you've heard already and what you're going to hear is that things are changing. So if you want to start the presentation. All right, so hopefully many of you have ridden a bike share in San Jose or in our other parts of the service area in the Bay Area, San Francisco, and the East Bay. This is our map of our service area. The dots represent actual bike share stations. So the green dots are bike share stations, and the black dots represent roving e-bikes that we have in our system right now. We have about 81 installed bike share stations in San Jose, and the system is almost complete. We've got one left that we want to install. I'm very excited to at Berryessa Station. And now that the BART station is opened, we're just working on legal agreements with all parties involved to get that station up and running. But we're very excited to have kind of our network in San Jose be complete. Next slide. So here's a little snapshot of ridership. So I don't think any of this is going to be new to you. Some of the comments that Sam has said, and perhaps even just ridership of any mode, you know, more or less follows this trajectory. You know, I'll say that Lyft, I feel very proud to be working for Lyft in that we have stuck around during this pandemic. You know, back in March, it was a pretty uncertain time for all of us, and we made the decision, working very closely with all of our city partners, to keep bike share in operation. And we saw a big dip in riders, and we added some safety protocols around cleaning, but we wanted to be there for those who needed to continue to use bike share. So this graph represents all station-based trips since January. So the e-bikes on the gray and the classic bikes on the top. Kind of following that dip in March and April, we see ridership going back up. About a fifth of these rides also are equity rides. These are made by our Bike Share for All members. Next slide. And just to take a look, I guess to kind of share what we've been doing in response to the pandemic, we launched in April our critical healthcare worker program, providing free bike share for critical healthcare workers. This started in April and lasted for about 2 months. And we did a little bit of an analysis kind of at all of our bike share markets across the country, including the Bay Area. We saw an uptick in usage, people kind of starting or ending a trip near hospital going up. Now, there might be a lot of other factors here, but this data suggests that people that were our healthcare workers were using bike share more during this pandemic. We measured that by saying it was 250 meters from a hospital. Nationwide, we provided 350,000 free trips to critical workers. And interestingly, 80% of the trips made by in these critical programs, they were brand new to Lyft's micromobility services. So I think we were able to capture some new people. Next slide. So this is kind of our last slide. You know, another way that we are supporting the country in this time is during some of the solidarity protests that are happening, we are waiving our overage fees. So want to give people the opportunity to use bikes in some of these protests across the country. If you know of one that's happening soon, please just reach out to me directly, and happy to see what we can do. Yeah, and I think overall, you know, the usage, as Sam kind of laid out, ours kind of mirrors that. There's been a dip, there's been a shift in how people are using it, more recreational, longer duration, and very curious to see kind of how this plays out in the months to come. And I think that I will now pass it over to Andrea. Sorry, Sam.
Thanks, Neil. Yeah, Neil, really helpful to understand what you guys are seeing. We're seeing very, very similar in the sense that We are seeing significant upticks in usage around hospital centers and other healthcare facilities. That distribution has started to come down closer to where it began at the beginning of before the pandemic. But in that early pandemic era, we really saw a big uptick. I think the map, and I didn't include it in my presentation, was from Oakland, where we had seen lots of ridership to and from BART stations, and that shifted immediately to be ridership to and from Pill Hill. So really quick shifts in Oakland, more so than I think we've even saw in San Francisco or San Jose. So interesting to see how those shifts are happening. But yeah, I wanted to quickly talk about mode shift. I mean, we reached out to a cross-section of our riders around the world, and this is what we saw as the pre-COVID trip purposes, primarily around commute and social. And if you could switch to the next slide. Those are all gone. First, last mile, social, commute. So now we really are seeing more of this errands and joyrides. But that is also leading to other shifts in the process. So if you take it to the next slide, that'd be great. This is how we're seeing the shifts in San Jose itself. On the left is February before COVID, and on the right is June, the most recent month that I pulled here. You see in February, really concentrated in the downtown, around Diridon and around the stations, and in June, a much, much broader geographic distribution. This mirrors very much what we were seeing in San Francisco, less so in Oakland, interestingly enough. And so far more people in their neighborhoods. And so we're seeing people are pushing and using these devices further from the downtown core for these afternoon errands. Next slide, please. Similar, you'll see this on the time demand shifts. This was February, this is June, also San Jose specific data here. In February, you see a decent sized morning, and then it grows up over the course of the day, and then tails off slowly in the evenings as people are using devices to get to and from entertainment in the evening. Here you see a very gradual and then a sudden spike right after work hours, and then it drops very quickly as nightlife is no longer what we think of it as it once was. So just a little, start to seeing real shifts. Now, these are changing as we slowly emerge from the pandemic, from the lockdowns, and we're seeing they're changing at different rates. The Bay Area, as I would venture to say, is actually the lowest to return to normal patterns of operations. We're seeing in other cities around the US, and particularly in Europe and in Australia, that they're moving much quicker back to what we would consider regular usage. Not only is the US moving slower, but I'd say the San Francisco Bay Area is the slowest metro region in the country to move away from this. That could be related to COVID, that could be related to the regulations, but it's just interesting to see how the shifts are taking place at different rates. And with that, I'm gonna pass it over to Andrea to talk about what we're seeing at the city.
Thank you. I wanna thank, folks like Neil and Sam that are working to continue to provide services under very difficult circumstances to residents of cities like ours. We really shout out your efforts at this time. Can we move to slide 15, please? So COVID-19 has severely affected shared micromobility in San Jose. Many of the shared e-scooters and bike share users in the city used to be university students, people going to conventions, concerts, and sports events. Most of that activity has been shattered with COVID-19. So there has been a significant decline in the demand for shared devices in the city. And even though ridership seems to be recovering, especially in the last month or so, it is happening very slowly. And we do see trends similar to what Neil and Sam are exploring. Can you move to the next slide, please? So we see some opportunities in the current ridership trends. We see now a few more rides in areas around outside of the downtown core, as Sam mentioned before. It's not like a huge shift, but we do see now folks traveling more between different city districts and further away. Next. And we also noticed that people using the scooters that have sort of like a seat and a cargo option, so more adaptable devices, are also traveling much longer distances than the typical stand scooter. Next. So with these changes in mind, actually, can we go back to slide 14? I'm sorry, I'm gonna do a little bit of a trip here. So with these changes in mind, one of the big questions we're exploring right now is, what is the future role of e-scooters and bikes in the city's urban mobility ecosystems? You know, we want micromobility to be safe. We want it to be accessible to all. And we want it to become a sustainable transportation option for people now and after COVID-19. Now I'm going to travel to slide 18, I'm sorry. So we're looking at ways in which we can use this very difficult situation to our advantage to support micromobility options, initially via small-scale infrastructure improvements, like you see in this slide of micromobility corrals, via nascent technology opportunities that can help us manage parking and clutter. But eventually, we know that we need to find ways in which we can develop incentives to make alternative transport options like bikes and scooters more accessible, both in terms of safety and cost. And this is one of the biggest challenges we have right now. So I think this is a great segue to move to the next topic, Dave, about equitable and affordable access.
Yeah, thank you, Andrea. At the California Bicycle Coalition, we prioritize getting bike share and scooter share available for disadvantaged communities. The state provides a $20 million grant program for agencies that want to incorporate bike share into their into their transit programs. It's called the Clean Mobility Options Program. Please look it up on our website. I noticed that someone in the questions pointed out that San Mateo doesn't have a bike and scooter share program, and said that San Mateo could have it if Samtrans was willing to operate it. That is getting agencies to operate their bike share programs is one of the ways that we can make it equitable. Neil, the Bay Wheels has one of the best in the country in terms of providing access for low-income folks. Can you tell us a little bit about your Bike Share for All program?
Yes, our Bike Share for All program provides affordable, accessible transportation. It's the cost to join is $5 for the first year, and then 5 months after that. So bikes are available 24/7, and trips up to 60 minutes are all free, or included with a membership. We've got a reduction on e-bike fees, kind of where applicable, with that membership as well. We have we used to have a couple of in-person sign-up locations, one at Good Karma Bikes in San Jose, but given the current situation, that location is temporarily closed.
Margarita Parra, do you want to tell us a little bit about the Clean Mobility Options program?
I can. Can you hear me? That's a good plug-in. Thanks, Dave. But I'm actually not working any longer in that program, but I'm happy it was mentioned because I was supporting Grid Alternatives to really bring those resources to underserved communities. And the idea is to actually go where the companies like Lyft and Lime, and thank you for being in this business, but we know that there's so many underserved communities for which bicycle share could be a solution, but the business model doesn't work. So the idea is to really bring these public and private partnerships to bring those services to low-income communities and communities of color. So thanks for the chat.
Sure. I know, Sam, you have good information about the programs in Portland and in Denver that manage to provide bike and scooter share to low-income communities. Can you please share with us some of that information?
Sure, thanks, Dave. You know, much like Lyft operates its Bike Share for All program, Lime operates a Lime Access program that provides discounted service. In the Bay Area, it's $5. It's $5 for 30-minute rides, and so there's very similar functions. I think the key question, as we often look at it, is how do you create a system that supports and in fact meets and exceeds the equity distribution deployment goals of cities and counties and in fact providers, while simultaneously having a program that is that, you know, at the end of the day is a program that can continue to sustainably operate and invest in better technology and in high quality operations. And particularly this is a lot of questions around, it's how do you close that funding gap in a lot of ways? Because it's expensive and difficult to offer these services. Lyft, I know, has a large and well-run program, Lime as well. You know, these things are not free. And I think when a lot of smaller communities have looked at it, it doesn't necessarily always pencil out. And we're seeing this right now with the failure of a lot of bike share programs that were some of that early generation of bike share programs. And those are, you know, we're seeing everywhere from, you know, the Denver program, which is no longer around, the Seattle program that has gone through various iterations. And so as we look at the various questions of how we can create something that serves equitably, but also serves with multimodally, that has bikes for those who want to ride e-bikes, that has scooters for those who want to take them, that has other third options. I was looking in the chat around cargo bikes and adaptive vehicles. And so really, as what we're seeing in Portland, there's a model where it's, like Dave has said with the $20 million, there's a model where cities subsidize the particular activities that are otherwise unprofitable. And so it can be, in a way, like how can a city or a community step up to say, we want this particular service that otherwise would not work financially, and we're going to put our money and we're going to put our time into making it work. So in Portland, they've done that with the idea of paying, helping low-income community members meet the gap in a lot of ways, so that they're paying nothing to be able to ride, but the companies still get some sort of revenue that helps offset the cost of operations. Another option is a place like Denver, where both Lime and Lyft, excuse me, Neil, Lime and Lyft are recently announced as the two providers for Denver for the next 5 years. There's a strong desire in Denver, where many of the low-income communities are further from the downtown core than a stand-up scooter. They're 4 or 5 miles away, where we can offer bikes and e-bikes in low-income communities in exchange for offering scooters in the downtown core. So this is sort of a cross-subsidy model, in that you subsidize the options in communities that otherwise would be difficult to operate, with allowing for increased operations in communities that can help pay for those. So there's a couple of different models, one where there's a potential subsidy from an external source, and then one where you're cross-subsidizing operations within a given city.
So I want to make sure we address a good question that was asked a minute ago, and this is for one of you. I don't know who might have the answer, and that is that the stats that you've been showing have all been related to the growth and changes in micromobility use. Do any of you have information about the total number of trips, particularly the proportion of total trips in a city that are made by micromobility? What's the impact here that micromobility is making?
Sorry, Dave.
Yeah.
Oh, no.
Yeah, I don't have kind of a comparison of our trips compared to other trips that are happening. Andrew, I don't know if the DOT collects that or analyzes that information.
Sorry,
Yeah,
Dave. Sorry, Andrea.
No, I was going to say I don't have that information right now, but that's, you know, that's something that we're looking at collaborating more closely with other teams to understand the relationship between micromobility and other modes. Right now, transit has also suffered significantly because of COVID. And so we don't have a good overview of that as of now, but it's something that we probably will look more closely.
Can anybody address the issue of minors on bikes and scooters? Who lets people under the age of 18 have access to this resource?
Yeah, I'm happy to take that one. It's unfortunately the challenge is actually not around, it's around legal liability. That minors are unable to legally enter into a contract to rent a device under the age of 18. So that's the challenge there, to be totally honest.
Great, thank you. Before we move on to our next topic, do any of the panelists have anything else they want to say about equitable bike share integration with transit or the trends related to COVID?
I think I want to highlight that what we see now, for example, that programs like Bike Share for All in a time like this, I think have made e-bikes a little or bike share a little bit more resilient than shared scooters in San Jose. And we believe that part of the reason is not just because e-bikes were recently introduced, and those are very, very popular as well for the bike share program, but also because there was a strong, built up ridership, an access program for low income folks. And we see that these are the type of services that these communities really will go to at these difficult times. So now we understand that these programs are really critical for the long-term survivals of this service under difficult circumstances like this one. So we are exploring ways in which we can help these scooter companies to strengthen their access programs, either by supporting their outreach efforts, or as Sam mentioned, we're looking into alternatives like potentially lowering some permit fees to encourage operators to expand services to disadvantaged areas in San Jose, or provide services that otherwise won't be profitable.
Yeah, and I'll just add, we're eager to partner with folks on getting the word out about our Bike Share for All program. Help people kind of walk through the process. The shift to virtual has been a challenge in our outreach activities, but we can overcome that. So if you've got ideas, if you have a community that you'd like to partner with, please reach out and let me know, and we can talk.
Yeah, full agreement. Same thing here. We had hosted a lot of in-person sign-up events, partnership with community organizations, and obviously that's not really happening as nobody's meeting up in person. So please do let us know how we can engage virtually to get community members who are eligible for Lime Access, in our case, or in Bike Share for All, in Neil's case, to get them on devices and make sure it's affordable.
Fantastic, thank you. So, Andrea, you hinted at your work with companies and small business owners to facilitate micromobility. Do you want to tell us a little bit more about what you are doing in San Jose to get political support and the support of opinion leaders and community leaders for more shared bikes and scooters?
Yeah, sure. So I reside in the city of San Jose in the bike ped team, and my group is always trying to devise ways in which we can develop like the most extensive and accessible bikeway infrastructure and microservices as quickly as possible and with a minimum budget. And this is the reason why we're relying a lot on Quick Build. If you're familiar with the Better Bikeways programs on San Fernando Street in San Jose, those are the new bike lanes that we've installed. And we do this quick build not just because we can do more with less resources, but also because these quick build projects help us highlight the need and the importance for micromobility infrastructure in the city. So we can highlight how many cyclists and scooter riders are using the bikeways and the stories of the people that like them and want them in their streets and in their neighborhoods. However, we often run into a lot of difficulties with stakeholders that still see automobile access as paramount to their existence. And those stakeholders could be businesses or residents. So to add a bike lane or a street corral, you probably need to remove some car parking and a travel lane. And anything that alters the current status quo for automobile access or parking is really difficult to address. From the perspective of a restaurant owner, a single scooter rider perhaps brings less business than a family of 4 in a car. And those concerns, although we know there's data that doesn't support these, those concerns are very legitimate. So do you think you can go back to the presentation on slide 18, because that helps illustrate what we're doing to go around this?
Yeah, Deanna, why don't you do that? And let me go ahead and suggest that after Deanna shows folks that Deanna goes straight to the web to show
18.
Lime action.
Thank you. So one way that we're trying to go around this is we're trying to minimize that initial impact or perception that micromobility is taking space away from other modes or from pedestrians. So we started working with this very quick build, share micromobility corrals in which we have bikes and scooters, as you see on the left side. But we're also started looking at red curb space where vehicles are not, able to park anyways, and those red curbs are because either the space is not sufficient for a full-size vehicle or for visibility purposes or other reasons, but that those spaces would be suitable for bikes and scooters. So as you see here on the right, and that red curb is just basically, that's like the low-hanging fruit, but there's many opportunities in a city like San Jose that has sort of like a very sprawl type of development. We find a lot of spaces like this that we can just seize the opportunity now that people are demanding more sort of like street life and are using more of their own personal devices to sort of like place share micromobility on the street and try to recoup a little bit of that public space. And we're getting positive feedback from business owners and communities because they do not perceive that as we are competing with potential customers or potential services, but that we are adding services to it. So it's just one way that we figure out how to not just make way for micromodes, but also mitigate the potential impacts of having scooters traveling on sidewalks and parked on sidewalks.
Thanks, Andrea. That degree of political involvement is very, very exciting to me. I want to tell a quick story about the day I deleted the Uber app from my phone several years ago when San Francisco was making some improvements to Market Street that limited car access except for taxis. Uber sent a message to all of their users in the city: don't let the city do this. We need access to Market Street for our Uber cars. It was very powerful political action. I'm happy to say that it didn't prevail, and the Market Street improvements were made and more recently enhanced to be almost car-free. But it demonstrated the power that this constituents have. I'm even more happy to say that recently, with Uber recognizing that bikes are more profitable for short trips, Lyft the same, and with companies like Lime and Bird getting all of their revenue from micromobility, bikes and scooters, that they have started to use that political constituency to advocate for safer streets for people who bike and walk. It's a very important development in political advocacy for our movement, and they're all doing great work. Lime has a platform called Lime Action that Sam is going to share with us now.
Thanks, Dave. And I'll keep it real short because I know we're running short on time. I think the question that we look at is how we've got this great constituency of folks, and we can that are using bikes and scooters on Lime, on Lyft, and on other locations. What Dave said, was really using your own. Uber was using their own riders to achieve an end for Uber. But the question is, how can we partner with our riders and constituents to create an end that is best for cycling, that is best for safe streets? And so to that end, we've created this idea of Lime Action. And it's a place where our riders can go to access resources, to figure out, learn who are the organizations in their community. So if you're a 95112, you've got the great work of the Silicon Valley Bicycle Coalition. You've got the League of American Bicyclists. You can, if you scroll down a little more, you've got Saving Public Transit. What can you do to ask Congress to help save public transit? One more that we're going to be adding in the next couple of days is, which we just sent out a message to all of our riders, the Silicon Valley Bicycle Coalition has a petition right now. So we push that out to our riders. It's a petition to the city of San Jose. And so we can help SVBC build political support and bring in tens or hundreds of thousands of new people into their orbit and into the orbit of activating on behalf of safe streets. So this is something to play around with. It also works in our app in that we push things directly to riders, asking them to take political action. So hopefully this will be helpful, and reach out to us if you're interested in getting involved.
Thank you, Sam. I would love to get some famous spokespeople for our cause as part of that political action. LeBron James is a famous spokesperson, and Lyft has actually worked with LeBron James in a program that also gets youth on your bike. So how did you at Lyft, Neil, get around the age thing and, in order to implement that program?
Yeah, no, I hear it. The getting 16 and 18-year-olds is a great idea in lots of different ways. The agreements that we have with the MTC currently specify that users must be 18 and over. I think I may have heard also in the past that might have something to do with helmet laws and other kind of liability issues that are unique to California. So we've got 18 and over requirement, but I know that we are in discussion with the MTC and with some of our partner cities on potentially changing that. There's a lot of kind of legal and other issues that we have to sort through, but we hear folks, and we are seeing what we can do to kind of make that change. And yeah, later this fall, we are looking forward to our partnership with LeBron and getting more youth out, whether they're 16 and over in other parts of the country or 18 and over here. There's still youth, young people, young adults that are 18 and over that I think are going to get excited about bike share in a new way when we get to roll this out this fall.
We have just a few more minutes, so I'm going to go through these questions as quickly as I can. Can anybody address whether or not cargo bikes are envisioned as part of your shared fleets?
Yeah, we get that question a lot too. I haven't seen a bike share system. Maybe if any of you all know of one that kind of successfully incorporates that. We just unfortunately don't have plans right now to add that to our fleet. But I know that with the e-bikes, and we do work a lot with accessibility organizations and with cities on accessibility. I think our e-bikes have opened up biking to more people, and yeah, would be curious to see how we could work on diversifying our fleet even more in the coming years.
Yeah, the one place that I've seen it, the challenge is that you're going to walk up to a bike or a scooter and use it in that moment, right? I can't know where a cargo bike is going to be needed. And so to have it deployed ahead of time. One place where I have seen that be successful is more in the idea of a bike library. So I'm up in San Francisco. San Francisco Bike Coalition has a bike library of cargo bikes. And so I think we've seen that also in Portland. So there are a number of places where a cargo bike library could probably work better than an off-the-street rental.
Another question has to do with the ideal number of shared devices. Obviously, we could use more. There's rare occasions when there's too many. I think San Diego was one of those occasions where they actually had too many. But usually we need more. What is the ideal number? And can you discuss where you'd like to be in terms of the amount of scooters and bikes? And also, can you compare San Francisco and San Jose, for example, in terms of the saturation?
Yeah, those numbers are constantly in flux of what's needed, and so I'm not privy to all the details because I'm not on the operations team, but we are always looking at demand. What is the demand kind of in a given week, in a given month, in a given year, and how does it change? And we're able to change up our classic bike fleet and our e-bike fleet sizes accordingly in order to meet that demand. And we work very closely with all of our cities and kind of looking at what those targets are and responding accordingly. So I don't think there's a magic number because depending on the time of year, depending on whether people are working or not, a lot changes. But I think we have several hundred e-bikes currently that are on the streets in San Jose. And I think we're able to meet the demand that's currently there. And as that demand goes up, we will be able to add more bikes.
Sam or Andrea, do you have any insight on that?
Yeah, I mean, I agree with Neil. It depends on the demand, and we in San Jose currently don't have a specific cap, although we are about to implement a cap of a maximum 1,000 devices per operator. But what we really want to do is move to sort of like flexible caps, that adjust with demand to ensure that we don't have too many vehicles parked in the public right away, but that there are enough vehicles available. And that really changes sometimes seasonally, sometimes, due to special events and things like that. With COVID, of course, it's a matter of how many people are out there feeling confident enough to take a scooter ride these days. But we're definitely looking at having more sort of like a more smart, cap per demand. We can look at utilization ratio, how many times a device is used per day, and other metrics that help us assess, what would be sort of like the right number of devices for a significant period of time. In San Jose, one thing that we've noticed, and the reason why we implemented the 1,000, or about to implement the 1,000 device cap, is that we see that operators are actually able to respond more swiftly to complaints and address issues more promptly when their fleet size are up to 1,000 devices. Beyond that, we notice that there is more difficulty in handling operations on the ground for a city like ours. And that's just we don't have a lot of hard data to support that claim, but is our perception thus far.
Well, your perception is highly informed, Andrea.
Exactly.
So we appreciate your expertise, and we appreciate yours too, Neil and Sam. Thank you so much. It's noon, so I believe we are due to give folks a break. Shiloh, Deanna, Sandhya, any final comments from the Silicon Valley Bicycle Coalition?